Hello viewers, in this video, we will see how this line plot in Minitab is used to understand interaction effect of multiple factors on a response parameter. So in Minitab, we have a graphical representation. So let me keep my mouse pointer on line plot. So the mouse pointer highlights line plot is a visual compare. It is a visually compare a response for two or more groups used to explain or explore interaction and overall response. So what do we mean by interaction of multiple factors on the response parameter? During our Lean Six Sigma training at various stages, we will use the word Y is a function of X. So my output parameter is a function of input and process parameter. That is what we generally mean by Y is a function of X. For example, here I have a data, which is CSAT score in a contact center. So when people answer query, after their call get closed, a survey being rolled out to the customer, and customer will respond how satisfied he or she in a call. And that percentage is what we call it as customer satisfaction score. So this customer satisfaction score is being gathered for certain issue types, hardware issue, operating system issue, internet issue, and similarly for different line of languages. So some calls land into English call queue and some calls land into other language. Let's assume in this contact center, you have English as a language in which customer tech support issue of a laptop or computer get resolved. And there is another queue where any of other regional language like Hindi, Tamil, English, Telugu, Kannada, any other language, those calls get landed in other language queue. There also issues get resolved. And similarly, then you also have whether it is a desktop computer or a laptop computer. So this is what we call it as a factor. So there are factors like what type of issue it is. There are factors like in which language the support is delivered. And there is also a factor like what is the computer type? Is it a desktop computer or a laptop computer? And the final output parameter will be your CSAT score. So in this case, CSAT score will be considered as the response parameter or Y. In the equation of Y is equal to F of X, CSAT score will be my Y and my X's are what type of issue it is, what is the language in which we are offering the support, and what type of computer it is. It is a desktop or a laptop computer. So this is how we need to understand this data. And once we understand this data like this, now we are going to see what is the interaction effect of these X's on the output parameter. And that interaction effect can be graphically explained using the line plot. That's what we're going to see now. So let me open line plot. And in line plot, if you see here, there are multiple options that we have. The multiple options that we have is what is the impact of Y based on two X's. So that's the first option. And then what is the impact of multiple Y's? I'll also explain that what do you mean by multiple Y's. And we'll also understand about the series in rows or columns. How does this work? So basically the kind of graphs you see at the top row and bottom row are pretty much same. It's only about the symbols that is available or not available, which differentiates the graphs that you see at the top and the bottom. So let's first start with what is the role of X's on a single Y. So I select this graph, I click on OK. So as I told, you can do this calculation for average of response parameter. That's what we are going to use in this example. We are going to see the average of CSAT score. But if your data is count or if your data is sum, depending upon what you are dealing with, or if you are not dealing with the normally distributed data, then instead of mean, you can even go for median. So these are all different descriptive statistics on which this line plot can be drawn. But generally, the line plots are drawn on average, but depending upon the area of study, what we wanted to understand, you can choose any of these options. So let me select mean. And as I told, my response parameter is CSAT score. CSAT score is my response parameter. Now, what I want to understand is, I wanted to understand the categorical variable. So here I'm going to see the interaction effect. The first interaction effect that I'm going to see is the model of computer, whether it is a desktop or a laptop computer. And the second interaction effect that I'm going to see is what language in which we are supporting the customer. So in the model also, we have only two types, desktop, laptop. And the language also we have English and other language calls. So this is what we have in the model and language. Now if I click OK, I get a interaction plot. Now how should I read this interaction plot? If you see here, a desktop call, whether it is an English call, it scores somewhere around 86 or 88 percentage. The CSAT is 88 percentage. Whereas if it is a other language call, then the CSAT score is as low as, let me keep my mouse pointer here, as low as 69 percentage. Whereas if you see a laptop call, then the CSAT score for a English call is somewhere around 86 percentage, whereas if you see for an other language call, it is somewhere around 89 percentage. So what is your takeaway from this graph? The takeaway from the graph is there is a strong interaction effect depending upon the model of the computer and the language in which we are supporting. So if it is an English language call, definitely the computer. So what we need to understand here is, if it is an English language call, whether it is a desktop or laptop does not really matter. The score is almost same, flat. Whereas when it comes to desktop calls, right? When it comes to, sorry, other language calls, the desktop scores very less, whereas the laptop score very high. Then what we need to say is there is a strong interaction between the model of computer, whether it is going to be a desktop or laptop, and the language in which it gets support. These two have a very strong interaction. Otherwise, you would have seen these two lines parallel to each other. If these two lines converge at a point and diverge at a point, it clearly says there is an interaction effect. So now here what we need to understand is it because the laptop team is doing a very good job both in English and other language calls, or is it the English calls in general doing very good, but when it comes to desktop, the other language team is actually not doing a good job, because the other language team line graph is showing a steep slope, and here you see they are somewhere around 68, but here they are somewhere around 90. So this is what we understand by a two-way interaction between the model of computer and the CSAT score. Now to understand this better, let's do one more thing. So I'm going to minimize this graph, and I'm going to now see how language have an interaction with issue type, right? So let me select issue type here, and let me select language here, and then I will click OK. And now if we see, the graph is almost parallel. Maybe what we can understand here is definitely English language calls and other language calls, there is a difference. However, there is no interaction. We don't see an interaction because the English language call and other language call have a difference in hardware related issues. Maybe the difference is getting smaller when it comes to internet related issues, and the difference is getting much smaller when it comes to operating system related issues. The reason, if you can understand this very well, because if it is a hardware related issue, you have to have a lot of communication with the person in the other side. You have to make him remove some of the components, like you need to remove the RAM and put the RAM again, or you need to do some troubleshooting steps. So there is a lot of communication and instructions that need to be delivered by the person who is trying to give troubleshooting steps and the person who is trying to receive troubleshooting steps and try to solve it. Similarly, internet related issues may require relatively less interaction. An operating system related issue requires very little interaction, because you can directly say, depending upon the error message, press this key or press take these actions. So the communication, the need for communication becomes lesser when it comes to operating system related issues, whereas the need for communication is relatively more in internet related issues, and it is much bigger when it is a hardware issue. So this is how you can understand. So in the previous example, we clearly saw there is a strong interaction between the model of computer and the language, whereas when it comes to issue type and language, the interaction is not that great. In fact, the lines are very much parallel. Maybe there is a convergence only at the operating system related issues. Now we will see the next type of graph that we can draw in this line plot. The next type of graph that we can draw in the line plot is, let me click on stat, sorry, graph. I go to line plot. Now, the other example that I'm going to see is there is a fabric company, there is a textile company where they use certain type of machine and certain type of operator. So the machines are termed as machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, machine 4, and operators are termed as operator 1 and operator 2. So when this operator 1 and operator 2, when they work in machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, machine 4, how is the strength of fabric and how is the temperature of the machine changes? So that is what we are going to see. So here you can understand machine and operator as my x's, input and process parameter, temperature and strength as my output parameter. So I'm going to compare y1, y2. So y1 is temperature, y2 is strength. So I'm going to select this graph and I'm going to click OK. So here I'm going to compare two of my output parameters. Strength of my fabric is one of the output parameter. Temperature will be the next output parameter. And in the category, first I'm going to analyze how strength and temperature changes depending upon machine. So I have 4 machines. So how temperature and the strength of fabric changes depending upon in which machine it gets operated. Now if I click OK, now if you see here, machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, machine 4. These are the symbols. And if you see here, machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, machine 4, when it comes to strength of fabric, it's almost converging very close to each other. There is no huge difference between the strength of fabric when it comes to the machines. Whereas when it comes to the temperature that get generated, there is some kind of divergence. If you see this, the single blue dot indicates machine 1. It generates more temperature compared to the other two. So there is an interaction effect depending upon in which machine you are going to operate, how much temperature it's going to generate. There is an interaction effect, but there is no significant interaction when it comes to strength. Now we will minimize this graph and then we will see how these two parameters changes with respect to operators. So now we will select operator A and or operator 1 and operator 2. Let me select OK. If you see here, we have 3 operators. Sorry, it was not 2, it was actually 3 operators, operator 1, operator 2 and operator 3. And if you see here, the amount of divergence is almost same, but what we can understand is depending upon the operator, the strength changes, but not in the same order the temperature changes. There is some amount of variation, but not in the same order. So this is another way of looking at it. And friends, what we will do is this example, we will try and see how the previous graph comes out, like how we have did a CSAT analysis. Similarly, we will do an analysis to understand how the line plot is used to understand interaction effect of machine and operator on temperature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select temperature as my response parameter. And in interaction, I'm going to select machine. And I'm going to select operator. And now I'm going to click OK. When I select machine, operator, and I select strength as a parameter, you see here. So this line, that is a blue line, a red line, and a green line. So these 3 lines indicate how these Y parameters changes with respect to operator and with respect to machine. For example, if operator 1 is using machine 1, the strength of the fabric is at this point. And if operator 1 is using machine 2, the strength increases. And if operator 1 is using machine 3, the strength reduces. And if operator 1 is using machine 4, it slightly increases. If you see actually machine 1, machine 3, machine 4, the dots are pretty much flat. I would say still there is some variation, but not a significant variation. However, if you see at machine 2, if the operator 1 is using machine 2, the strength of the fabric is significantly increasing. And what does that tell you? That tells you there is a strong interaction effect when it comes to operator 1 and when he is using machine 2. So that's the takeaway of this particular graph. And similarly, if you see for operator 2, the line is pretty much flat when the operator 2 is using machine 1, machine 2, machine 3. The line is pretty much flat. But when this operator is using machine 4, there's a significant jump in the strength of the material. This again shows there is a strong interaction effect between the operator 2 and machine 4. Similarly, if you see operator 3, when the operator 3 is using machine 1 and machine 2, almost it is flat or very little drop. Whereas when you see this operator 3 using machine 3 or machine 4, there's a significant jump, and that shows there is an interaction effect between operator 3 and machine 3 and machine 4. Now, this graphical representation gives us a very good idea that I need to understand, go to the Gemba, do some work shadow with operator when the corresponding operator is using that particular machine. What is the good and bad that is happening when operator 1 is using machine 2, whereas other machines? Why we are able to get a significant strength increase when operator 1 is using machine 2? This is how we will understand this data. And finally, when I click on graph, and I go to line plot, I see this last option. And in this last option, what we are doing is we are understanding series in rows or columns. So what do you mean by series in rows or columns? If you see here, the label column is actually optional. So what we can understand is, let's assume I'm going to select strength of the fabric, and I'm going to see how this strength operates with machine. So if I click on strength with machine, what it will tell me is the strength of the machine, irrespective of the operator, is going in a trend like this. So if I use machine 1, the strength is somewhere here. If I use machine 2, it is somewhere here, and machine 3, it is somewhere here, and machine 4, it is somewhere here. If I keep my mouse pointer here, this is the total value that I'm getting. So this is sum of all these values. So that's what I get here. So again, if I minimize this, and if I press a Control E, I can see how the temperature changes. So what I can do is temperature based on machine. If you see the temperature based on machine, the temperature changes from this point to this point, comes down to this point. So this is how you see the trend. So similarly, I can show the same data in CSAT also. So let me click on graph, line plot. Instead of temperature, let me select CSAT. And let me take CSAT for issue type and click OK. So this is the total CSAT score. So if you see here, CSAT scores are getting added up. If you see hardware is somewhere here, operating system is somewhere here, and internet related issues, it is somewhere here. So this is how the line plot is getting used, friends. So in line plot, what we can understand is we will be able to understand the interaction of multiple X's on your response parameter. That is one option. So let me show you. When we click on graph, go to line plot. It tells you how do you see the interaction of multiple X's on a single Y. And we can also see interaction of multiple X's on two response parameters, which we saw in the case of temperature and strength of the fabric. And then we also saw the overall value of a data from a series or a column. So I hope this video was useful for you to graphically understand the interaction between X's, multiple X's on a single Y, or multiple X's on multiple Y's, or the effect of data in a series or a column. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe our channel for more videos on Lean Six Sigma, Minitab, and statistical and graphical representations. Thank you, friends.